All right, warm welcome to the 92, 93 folks that are just trickling in. I'm Sarah Archer, representing Chart Mogul, and here to moderate our first ever live panel of 2024. I'm really excited about this one. It's garnered quite a lot of interest, and so I hope that our lovely panel can deliver the content and answer the questions that you have in the next 45 minutes or so. I will let our esteemed guests introduce themselves, and then we'll jump right into a bit of questions. For those of you that have not joined us before, this is really an interactive session where we prepare a few questions in advance, but we also try to pull some questions directly from the chat and potentially engage the audience in some polls. All of this is, of course, recorded and will be turned into some live content pieces for you to consume after the fact. So no bother furiously scribbling down notes. We'll serve up some of the insights directly thereafter, and happy to answer any questions along the way. So without further ado, welcome to the How is SaaS Pricing Evolving panel. And Jenny, would you be so kind to introduce yourself?
Of course. Thank you for having me. I'm Jenny Millar, founder of Untapped Pricing. We're an award-winning consultancy giving tech leaders the clarity and the confidence to optimize their pricing to drive performance. I think pricing is so often that overlooked or neglected growth lever, but so powerful. So we go about demystifying pricing, removing the guesswork, and helping teams to build that pricing muscle in their business.
Awesome. Thanks, Jenny. You said growth lever, and I feel like that's just a really great segue for maybe Matt to introduce himself.
I should pull out a copy of the book. So on Tuesday, I published a book called Growth Levers. I call them levers, kind of American levers, growth levers, and how to find them. But before that, I spent most of my career in Silicon Valley with a few startups you never heard of. And I was on the early growth team at PayPal as well. So I've been both a marketer and a general manager, and I've been involved in a few pricing things over my career. I left and became a VC, so I got to kind of see this whole thing from the investor side. And now I run a company called SYSTM, SYSTM. And we work with about 80 startups per year to help them find their big growth levers.
Awesome. And Luca, would you round us out?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Luca, I'm French. I'm the CEO of a company that's called Hyperline. So we specialize in billing and especially making SaaS companies billing and invoicing process really, really simple. I used to be an engineer, and as an engineer and a manager in engineering, I've been involved in 5 or 6 pricing migrations in companies before, especially big companies with a lot of customers. And this has been a very interesting process. And as I went and made my way through product and today to being a CEO and a founder, I've seen a lot of different pricing things, and our specialty at Hyperline is obviously implementing them. So I hope we'll have a lot of cool migration stories tonight.
Yeah, very good. I'm picturing the beginning of the Chart Mogul blog that summarizes this panel, and I'm just pulling out all the words about pricing like hairy and tenuous, and it's definitely an interesting one for sure. So without further ado, thanks so much for all of you joining us and sharing your expertise. Let's just dive right into the questions. Jenny, the first question, maybe I'll point in your direction. Of course, in your purview, you get to see all different kinds of pricing models. So it's 2024, January, H1, for those of you that celebrate and don't think in quarters. What recent trends have you seen related to SaaS pricing?
Yeah, so I think savvy SaaS companies have definitely recognized that clients have got the majority of the power at the moment. So we're in this period of high inflation, economic volatility. So increasing numbers of SaaS businesses are shifting away, I think, from those traditional flat rate subscription models to usage-based and value-based models. And I think that's a reflection of the changing needs of SaaS users. So customers are becoming more discerning and expect more transparency and flexibility from their pricing models. I think they are increasingly reluctant to sign contracts for services that they may not be using fully or offer low returns. So pricing that then requires users to pay fees that are proportional to what the user has gained from that software feels far more appropriate, and value and price move more in sync as a result. So I think users are then less likely to leave. Just as a final thought on that, keen to hear what the others think, but just I think a game-changing example that popped up a couple of weeks ago as the landscape in SaaS pricing evolves was Zapier. So $5 billion company, like they switched to pay-per-task pricing a couple of weeks ago. So instead of that fixed monthly subscription, users now get unlimited zaps on all plans and pay per task for kind of overage tasks. And my guess there is that Zapier started to hear more and more complaints about those fixed monthly subs, and I think this move speaks volumes.
Yeah, that's interesting because this automation space is starting to get a bit more crowded as well. I mean, we've been Zapier customers forever, but you've sort of some new entrants like Pipedream and N8N, although I might not be pronouncing that correctly because I'm not so trendy, have started to potentially introduce some competitive landscape, which perhaps is a reason to look at your pricing. So I don't know, Luca, what do you think?
Yeah, I think the idea that the control is more and more on the customer side is actually the real thing that drives a lot of the evolutions right now. I agree with Jenny. What we are seeing lately is a lot of companies actually having some sort of pricing model that was always their base pricing model. So they have some kind of seat-based thing where they will have, one account per user. And then they're adding very custom models for each of the use cases that they have. Usually they would have packaged everything. They would have said like, hey, you're paying $5,000 a month and you get everything. Now they would be, oh, all right. So you just want this add-on or this model. So you're going to be able to pay that usage-based, and you're going to pay that, on a seat-based principle as a flat fee. And I see more and more complex pricing as well evolving, which drives complex pricing structures, complex upsell structures as well. It's harder to manage for the sales team. It's harder to manage for the CRMs, like Salesforce, HubSpot, for instance, as well. More and more personalization. And I think it's driven by the market, indeed. Like people just want to pay less, and they want to select just a few things within the product, and they want to use that. So I think that drives the change mostly.
I see. Yeah, and that sounds complex to administer from a finance and operations perspective for sure. I'm imagining trying to, partition off all of these different feature flags.
Even for the customer. I think Zapier, one of the main reasons they changed was, of course, business, but was also like customer feedback on the pricing. A lot of customers didn't understand the pricing, how it worked, how much they would pay. It was just very complex to understand how. And with the alternatives that are out now, they would just go elsewhere and find a simpler pricing that they understand, right?
But at the same time, estimating the volume of tasks seems sort of like a challenging task for a customer. If you said to me, how much automations do you need for a lead assignment? I think I would struggle to kind of come up with an accurate number. And then I might be a bit stressed about this, no?
You have the slider thing. Just like you can slide and see how much you would pay. So
I see. Okay, well, we've talked a little bit about some of the evolution of SaaS pricing around usage. I guess this starts to involve a number of folks, right? You said more complex sales teams. You said from a finance and operations perspective. I guess, Matt, do you have any ideas about, who should own pricing? If you're in a business that's starting to say, hey, we need to take a look at our pricing, how should a startup or a SaaS company start to, shape that project?
Yeah, I mean, who owns it? I wish I could tell you, there's this one answer. It's just this person in finance at every company, but it's never that simple. I think it needs to be a very bright, talented, well-respected leader in the organization for a few reasons. First of all, it's just complicated. I mean, setting the pricing is complicated. The engineering behind it, the pricing engines, the customer service edge cases, the retention, the tracking, the rollout is complicated. And it touches, just like you said, pretty much every team in the company: customer service, sales, marketing, product, finance, operations, engineering. And it touches them all in a bad way, right? So you're not going to have any, outside of the CFO's office, you're not going to have any friends. But you need all these people to help you. You need them to work together on a timeline, and you need this to come off pretty flawlessly. Like the only thing, you really don't want to botch a price change, because that can get just messy fast and cost you customers and bad publicity. So it's not an easy job. And I would look for, a really strong leader who is one of those people who's like quick to accept blame for themselves and give credit to others, And whatever their job is, just change their job till the price stuff is over.
Because it's like a pretty all-consuming project, right? To get it right.
Yeah.
Jenny, what do you think on that topic? Who should own pricing?
Yeah, so I totally agree. I have seen pricing fall under the CCO, the COO, the CMO, finance, the CEO, the founder, chief of staff, or it doesn't have a clear owner at all. I've also seen it passed around a leadership team like a bit of a hot potato, right? That no one really wants it. And I think that's because the stakes are so high when it comes to pricing. Like Matt says, it's complicated, it's often misunderstood or under-resourced. So I don't think there's necessarily a right or wrong place or role for that ultimate accountability for pricing to sit. But I definitely agree it needs to have an ultimate owner on the leadership team, so they have the sway and visibility to take action, and that they need to be supported by a cross-functional pricing task force, if you like, because pricing is so inextricably linked from product, your strategy, your marketing, your finance decisions. Pricing decisions shouldn't be made in isolation. So appoint that pricing task force, create those clear kind of pricing performance metrics, and build a cadence for reviewing pricing and building the muscle.
Yeah, you said like pricing task force. I'm trying to think of like pricing projects that I've been a part of that have maybe gone wrong, and from an ownership perspective, why that might have been. And as a head of sales, we need a really good counterbalance, because I have seen organizations where sales has too much sway in pricing, and they don't think of necessarily all of the complexity that it creates on the other side of things. Maybe they're close to the customer and can represent the customer's concerns or the customer's understanding of total cost of ownership, but start to maybe perhaps make things too complex or flexible for the business to administer with some consistency, which is really important long term, I feel, for using pricing sort of as a competitive moat, I suppose. So if you're one of these businesses that's saying, okay, I have somewhere in my body or in my brain this gut feeling that maybe my pricing needs another look. Perhaps I haven't looked at it in 12 months, 18 months. It's definitely it's time, right? You should be looking at your pricing probably every 6 months, maybe even sooner. So Luca, this question's for you. How do you know when your pricing isn't working? And maybe the flip side of that is like, when is it working?
Well, if everyone agrees, it's the obvious answer. Like if everyone agrees, probably too low. If no one agrees, probably too high. And if no one understands it, you probably need to change it as well. The thing is, and I think Matt mentioned it quickly, a lot of the pricing migrations actually involve engineering, because you need to change stuff in the product, you need to change your integrations, you need to change the CRM, you need to change a lot of different things. And so I think people tend to review pricing not often enough. So they tend to push back the pricing review. So they sort of go around in circles around what may not work. Like they go around the sales process. They're going to try to increase the whatever is something in the product. Basically, they're going to try to do everything rather than just iterate on pricing changes. So that what I would suggest, rather than waiting for the pricing to not work before making a change and before looking at things, because it's usually too late, because of especially if you have a big organization, the lag that you're going to have. If you have a pricing team, and then you have a billing team, and then you have an ops team, and like sometimes it takes 6 months, a year, 2 years to do a pricing migration. So what I would do, rather than waiting for it to fail and noticing that your pricing is failing, I would often try small changes with a subset of customers, a new segment of customer, for instance, or a new sales team, a new country. I would try and manipulate the pricing. So I would set up everything at the beginning so that it's easy to make a few changes and have a few customers that are on something else. And I would often, like maybe every 2 months, every 6 months, try new things. 1 deal, 2 deals, 3 deals. And you often get signals, like weak signals. You often get them soon enough. Like at the very beginning, the first 5 calls, you already know if yes or no, your customer has an issue with the prices, if they don't understand it. Like you have answers already. So I know it doesn't really answer the question, but rather than just waiting for it to fail, which is the obvious, like it's too expensive, it's not expensive enough, I would rather like try to iterate quite often and see if you have leverage that you can find somewhere, build a stack for that. But then, yes, try to find small leverages every 2 months into small pricing changes rather than change everything after 2 years, which is
and then get it wrong. And then get it wrong.
Small iterations.
Okay, 2 follow-up questions about small iterations. How do you do it without upsetting other customers in your customer base? And how do you do it without letting your sales team go rogue? Are you doing these iterations with like a very senior person or committee? Because if you give sales too much flexibility, they might just run with it. So any thoughts on those 2 questions?
Says the sales VP.
I was gonna say Matt is probably more able to talk about the sales team than I am because he's been working with sales for his whole career. Just on the first one, which is like customer feedback and everything, companies are often worried to try to change prices for new customers. So often they're gonna test pricing on existing customer base. The problem is your existing customer base has a relative perception of your value, because they've been using your product for a year, and so they may think that the grass is greener elsewhere. They may have seen bugs. They may have seen. So you're not testing the price reaction to the value proposition that you would have on new customers, but you're testing your price proposition relative to the value that they see of your product. So I would not be afraid, if you have volume, I would not be afraid to test prices on new customers. And you can always iterate on the contract, on the proposal. You can do several proposals with customers. Like it's not just one-shot things. So I would tend to iterate a bit more over the new ones rather than the existing ones, who tend to be a bit harder, and leave the existing one when you're sure of what you want to do. But I'll leave the sales thing to Matt. He's more experienced than me.
I'll talk about that, and I see some questions in the chat about, how do you know what you can get away with charging? So sales team, like anyone can sell a Ferrari for $1. That's not why you're hiring and paying a talented sales team. When companies want to lower their price or think the price is too high, 95% of the time they're wrong. There are a million reasons why people wouldn't be buying your product, and most of them are not the price. Most of them are they don't understand the value. They have open questions. They have anxiety about you as a supplier. They have internal stakeholder buy-in issues. They can't get engineering resources to integrate your product. They're worried about their reputation if they buy your product instead of HubSpot. There's a million reasons why people wouldn't be buying your product. And a good salesperson will ask questions and listen and uncover the real blockers instead of going to price. And that can really backfire, because if they have questions about the quality of your product or your company and you start lowering the price, that makes it seem even dodgier, right? Like, do you buy low price, the cheapest car you can find? Well, not if you're going to put your family in it, right? So how do you figure out what you can charge? So there's all these fancy, and Jenny knows, I'm sure, more about these than I do, the Van Westendorps and calculation pricing models. I'll just tell you a story. So early on, a few years ago, I was trying to do sell some training seminars, in-person workshops in London. And I went to a CMO who had expressed interest. I told him about it. It's 2 days, blah, blah, blah. And he said, how much is it? And I just made up a high number on the spot. I said, it's £5,000 for 2 days. And this could have gone 2 ways, right? So he said, how many people can attend? And I said, 6 people per team. And he goes to mental math. He said, okay, so it's about $800 a person. That's in my training budget, done. So first of all, I've learned I can charge a lot more than I thought. Second of all, I've learned how he justifies it. This is coming out of the training budget, and he calculates it per person. So I could make it 8 people and it would seem like an even bigger bargain. But if he had said no, then I would have followed up and I would have said, what would this thing have to do to be worth 5,000? And then the answer he came up with that would show me, what does he really value? What's he going to find the money and pay for? So I just like to pitch people with a really high price and see how they react, and then just follow up from there.
Yeah.
Cool.
So,
Jenny, what are you thinking?
Yeah, so almost to join the dots across those two answers, I think like do what you can to remove the guesswork, right? And switch into evidence, build some evidence that's going to directly inform those pricing decisions. So whether that is experimentation and making incremental changes, as long as you're testing and you're learning from those changes, how do customers react? If you're having those conversations, or you're verbally sense checking high numbers, you're understanding what they care about. And I think that is where teams often learn that the lack of conversion is not just about price, or it may not be about price at all, as Matt said. So I think gathering evidence can take various forms. Perhaps it is just speaking to a handful of customers, teasing out like the role of price versus other factors in their decision. What drives them to buy, stay? Or you can get really kind of quantitative with Van Westendorp questions to test willingness to pay and stack rank what value is unlocked by each feature to help you design choices that are going to appeal to different segments of your users or different needs. But yeah, I think it's all about that, removing the guesswork.
Cool. So it sounds like some empirical behind the computer modeling and workshopping as a team or committee is useful, but you need a posture of like some continuous testing with some active discovery to understand what it is how customers are reacting and what it is they're feeling, and a little bit more objection handling, with actual customers. So it's all these things kind of working together to develop sort of pricing as a muscle. That's kind of what I'm getting from the group here.
I mean,
super.
To be fair, just one thing on that. But to be fair, I saw a question in the chat I answered, but I think my answer got lost. But the margin that you have as a pure price point standpoint, like just the between 5,000 and 6,000, it's usually a lot driven also by your sales motion, your onboarding length, like how hard it is to get a customer, how long it takes, and that sort of things. And usually you have to evolve within a constrained boundaries. So it also simplifies the test. Like if you test from the beginning from 1,000 to 20,000 from the same product, if you do that for 2 years, you're probably losing time. You have to test within a smaller boundary as well and iterate over pricing models. But there is very few chance that if you have 6 month long onboardings and 6 month long sales cycle, selling a product for $5,000 is going to cut it. Like you probably have to sell a lot higher. And this helps the test as well. Narrowing down the possibilities.
Yeah, that's a good point. It doesn't feel like you've got to boil the whole ocean, but maybe just a small pond. Okay, there's a question in the chat that's getting a number of upvotes. I'll read it for the group, but it says usage and value-based pricing can lead to variable changes. Many businesses prefer predictable expenses. How can we as SaaS vendors reconcile those opposing ideas while closing the sale? Anyone want to volunteer for that one?
Look, I'm thinking about this from my time when I was a VC. And I think I'm going to say like investors aren't stupid. But then I say that, but then you see like a lot of the history of investors being very stupid. But when I was an investor, I always knew, like, I see how many active users you tell me you have, and I see how many people are paying your monthly fee. But I worked at PayPal for 10 years. I saw a lot of companies' billing systems, like from the inside. And I know that a lot of those customers aren't using your product, and they're just paying because they forgot to disconnect it, and they're going to stop paying at some point. And so I would always encourage founders to think about their revenue in 3 buckets: new MRR, happy MRR, and at-risk MRR, based on the activity levels of the accounts that are paying that money. And if you're thinking about that, no matter what your pricing model is, you should think about it that way. You can choose to show that number to your investors or not, but you have to be honest with yourself and know, if you're standing on solid ground, or like if it could shift under your feet at any time. And once you're thinking about it that way, and it gives you a bit of clarity, the shift to usage-based pricing over the long term, if you're delivering a good, valuable product, it should be no problem at all. I mean, the biggest, most successful businesses, PayPal, Google, Facebook, these are all pure usage-based pricing, and they're AWS, and they're printing money. So if you're doing your job and building a good product and getting people to use it, this should be an easy conversation. And if you're not doing those things, then this isn't the conversation you should be having anyways. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think again it comes back to get close to your customers. So is that a perceived worry or a limiting factor for your target audiences? And if so, how can you work with them to mitigate some of that perceived volatility in what they're going to be charged? In some cases, like price caps or bandings could be appropriate to kind of help stabilize billings from their perspective.
Okay, grand. Luca, sorry, did you have something to add?
No. I mean, everything's been said. We have, like, my company right now. We have that problem, which is like people want predictable expenses and they don't want it to be variable, but we want it to be variable. And on a very operational standpoint, the way we are solving it is you commit to a flat fee that gives you access to a certain amount of usage. That's like a yearly fee. It depends. The more you commit, of course, the less you pay. And then if you like move above the threshold, if you move past the threshold, then it starts being variable. And on a very operational way, that seems to convince both populations, the ones that want to have a fully variable fee and the ones who want predictability, but they understand that there has to be some kind of way for us to prevent like full flat fee, and so that growth wouldn't be rewarded on our side. So very operationally, that's how we solve the problem.
Okay, grand. Well, I'm not sure that we'll be able to ask all the questions that we've got streaming in here, but we can definitely see some good engagement in the chat. So thanks for sharing all of your ideas. Maybe let's shift gears a little bit. Let's say hypothetically you've landed on a fabulous pricing model. You're going to keep iterating because you came to this panel and you've developed some pricing model muscle and some good customer discovery to back it up. How does your pricing affect your acquisition strategy? I think this is an interesting question, especially for maybe businesses that are just getting started. They're trying to figure out their pricing or their go-to-market model for the first time. Jenny, you're shaking your head. Do you want to take a stab at that one?
Sure. Yeah, I think pricing can be a very powerful kind of acquisition tool for communicating value, differentiating your product, and kind of attracting those ideal segments. So a couple of thoughts to get us going, and I'm sure the others have more. The first is around optionality. So catering for different needs or different segments and attracting that sort of broader range of customers and appetite and willingness to pay. We talk a lot about, at Untapped, selling the cake, not the ingredients. So we see a lot of SaaS companies fall into that trap of displaying long itemized lists of features per package and forgetting to clearly signpost what the package as a whole would enable for the user. So I think making that value proposition per tier really prominent. So why should someone pick that package? And then they can dive into the feature sets to sort of validate their selection. But it's the buying decision itself and a user's willingness to pay is going to be rooted in the perceptions of the outcomes or the benefits of that tier. So sell the cake, not the ingredients.
Cool. Anyone agree, disagree?
I would tend to agree. I would also say that it's highly related to any sales process, any way of selling has a cost, any onboarding thing has a cost. That is like, that's what I mentioned earlier about the length of the sales cycle, the onboarding, the number of sales calls that is related to that. And that has a lot of influence on the price. Like even before you actually present the pricing to the person, that has a lot of influence on the price point that you want to set, on the go-to-market motion that you want to set. Do you want to do marketing? Do you want to, like, let's take an example of a company selling something for like 100 euros a month. You have to have a fully self-serve motion to do that, right? Almost fully self-serve. There may be a 15 minutes onboarding call. And I think there is a matrix that you can build with like some sort of like table where you input like the time of onboarding, number of sales calls needed, the seniority of the sales rep, the technicity of the process, and then you have some sort of like boundaries for the prices that you should have if you want to have a healthy business, because that's the most important thing. Like some business are financed and they're fine, but a lot of them actually need to be healthy in the long term. And so you can almost have some sort of Excel spreadsheet that's going to tell you, if you input the right numbers, we should be that actually, that's going to tell you where you should land in terms of the price points if you really want to sell the way you want to sell. So even before the customer has the occasion and the opportunity to think about the price, you need to think on your side and make sure this aligns with all of your operational processes internally.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think that's certainly true, and I agree. Although it's been my experience that size and complexity always don't marry so well, and sometimes you need to put more human resources on something to just kind of get it off the ground in the beginning. At least that was the case at ChartMogul for a long while. We had our sales reps, working with customers on a really wide span, from $200 a month in MRR all the way to $6,000 or $7,000 a month in MRR. And over time, we were able to kind of pull those go-to-market motions or acquisition models apart. And it was challenging. We could afford to put people on servicing those customers on the lower end of the market for some period of time, because we were able to retain those customers for very many years. But it's definitely a delicate balance. So I like this idea of a matrix and thinking about kind of how all the ingredients.
Did you raise money at the beginning? Like, what's ChartMogul a VC?
About
VC-based company?
So about 3.7.
Yeah, okay, so that's still limited amount. So you did small amounts of testing. Some companies are doing huge resources at the beginning, are putting huge resources, like they're spending 10K to acquire a 1K customer, for instance. But if you raise 100 million, that's doable. Most companies don't do that. So if you are like you, or like us, for instance, you don't raise that much, you can afford a little bit of testing at the beginning and a little bit of like intense onboarding sessions that are going to cost you money, but you can't keep that up for too long. Otherwise, it's just like you don't have a sustainable business.
Yeah, for sure. It was definitely a fun learning, but we've always kept the sales team small, which has allowed us to be pretty agile, and we've invested the vast majority of our resources into product and engiering.
Yes, and you have a good product, so that helps.
Thanks. You said it, not me. Okay, let's talk custom pricing. So we've sort of just described this like maybe almost like a PLG motion or a product motion where a short onboarding call gets the job done. Matt, what do you think about custom pricing? When does custom pricing make sense?
Kind of another PayPal story. I'm not sure I'm allowed to tell this one, so we'll see. But this was like 2007 or 8. And we had this little startup sign up for a PayPal account called Facebook. And they just like came to the website and signed up. No sales rep, nothing. And within 2 years, they were processing something like $20 million a month. And they weren't on any custom pricing. They were like paying through the door rack rate, which is about 4 times higher than what they could have negotiated. And we were having this big debate because it's like, we need to call them. Like, we need to have this conversation. They're going to figure it out and they're going to be pissed off. But like early Facebook, they could just barely even keep the servers running. They were growing so fast, right? So it's like, we got to call them, but like, we don't want to call them because this thing's just printing money. I mean, eventually we did call them and we negotiated pricing and it was all fine. But I think my big takeaway from that is like, whether you negotiate custom pricing has a lot less to do with the size of the contract and a lot more to do with the customer's willingness to pay. And again, as a salesperson, as a relationship manager, they should have a good sense for that and where those opportunities are. They have massive gross margins, whereas someone who's like a consumer electronics or sporting goods retailer is going to have a lot less money to pay for, to play with, and much higher fixed and variable costs. So I think it really, once you get past a certain threshold, you've got to look at willingness to pay.
Yeah, and maybe willingness to pay can somewhat be informed by knowing who your customers' customers are. This is a good exercise to do. We did this initially when the pandemic hit, because we were like, which of our customers are going to be affected the most? And how can we be proactive about making sure that we can retain them? And we basically did a drill down exercise where we said, who are our customers serving and how will those people be impacted? Because that will allow us the ability to see sort of one layer deeper. And that was an exercise that was done sort of furiously and not perfectly, that's for sure, but taught us a lot of things about our customer base. That was really interesting. There's a question in the chat here around migrations. So pricing migrations is just a fun one. I've done pricing migrations here at ChartMogul. I'm wondering if you're thinking about introducing new pricing, do you have any tips or frameworks for how to approach a pricing migration?
It's a question for engineering, right? I mean, I gave a few pointers earlier about not doing it in one go. Like the worst thing you can do, and we did it actually. Fun story. My previous company, we migrated pricing once overnight. So we decided that we would migrate 1,000. It wasn't that many, but like 1,500 customers overnight, and we got the billing system configuration wrong. It's not on them; it's on us. We got it wrong, so we invoiced double the VAT for everyone on that night, and we had everyone being billed on the first of the month. So on the second of the month in the morning, the customer success came in and had like 500 messages on the support being like, hey, you've invoiced me twice the VAT, which just sounds very bad. So long story short, just don't do it in one go. You migrate pricing by phasing it. So you make sure that you decide exactly what the new pricing is going to be. You test it before. You do that small iterations period. Maybe you use 6 months to do like 3, 4, 5 iterations until you actually decide what's going to be your final pricing model, because you've tested, iterated, and you're sure it's good for sales and it's good for upsells and it's good for like current customers as well. And then you migrate using phasing. So first it's the new customers, then it's the maybe the cohorts from 2023 and then the cohort from 2022. It really depends on the size of the customers. Like if you have 100,000 or if you have 100, it's not the same thing. But yeah, phasing, making sure you involve all the customer success, all of the sales team, everyone knows exactly what they have to do, having a process, the proper process to do it, and making sure engineering and tech has the time to do things properly and to integrate with the billing system properly as well, and the CRM and the ops team and the reporting. Rather spend 6 months doing the first integration and the first work and then migrating, rather than trying to rush everything and invoice double VAT, which isn't a good thing.
Yeah. I think I'd add to that. Oh, sorry, Matt.
No, please.
I was going to kind of add to that around like the narrative. So the narrative of the change, both internally, so your sales force can convey that to customers, field inquiries or pushbacks like consistently, confidently, rooted in kind of why the change is made and what you know about customer value. And of course, importantly to the customer as well. So why is the business doing this? What's behind this change? And I think being overt and transparent on that front is key. So again, yes, back to that Zapier example, like you told us it wasn't working, we listened, we're changing.
Yeah, that was the main thing I was going to say. We're just super proactive on the communication front, notifying customers several times in advance, briefing the hell out of sales and customer service so they have all the talking points, running, social media monitoring and sentiment analysis so that you know how it's landing. And if there's any fires, you can jump in and fight them right away. Just be over the top with the comms.
Yeah.
And don't let the lawyers write the messages. God.
Well, I was going to say writing. Like, I feel like at ChartMogul, we're a remote team and we really stress writing quality. And we have everyone read this book on writing well, because clear writing expresses clear thought. And I just feel like you can say we're changing pricing and here's why, but that message can get changed any number of times over before it gets delivered to the customers. And I think, you can see how that could go sideways really quickly. So cool. Great tips.
On that, I would also test the messaging. So you are confident in how users will react. Sarah, what's the book?
It's called On Writing Well. I'll drop the link here in a sec, or maybe Catherine can help me. It's a good one. Grand. Well, we just have 5 minutes here, and I'm curious. I feel like maybe the interest in this panel, which had, as I mentioned, quite a number of signups, is a result of like people realizing they need to develop this pricing model. So maybe one of my hypotheses about the future of SaaS pricing is that more people are going to become more comfortable with this topic. Maybe you've avoided this topic for some period of time and you're saying, okay, 2024 is my January resolution where I'm saying, okay, I'm going to teach the business how to iterate on this, and hopefully, we've provided you some resources and some ideas about that. Any lingering thoughts on the future of SaaS pricing models? Anyone want to drop some fiery hot takes before we kind of wrap things up here?
A couple quick things. First of all, on writing well is excellent, but so is ChatGPT these days. Michael Lau had some questions about usage-based versus flat fee pricing. I tend to think about that as it comes down to the distribution of value in your customer base. So if it's a normal distribution, like a bell curve, where all your customers are worth, plus or minus a factor of 3, like a meditation app or QuickBooks, and flat fee is fine. But if you have like a power law distribution of value where you've got a handful of customers who are massively bigger, more valuable than others, then you're going to want to go skew towards usage-based pricing. I think it's that simple. But it's an excellent question.
Great.
Yeah.
Grant,
on the future of pricing, Sarah, to answer your question, I don't have any prediction per se, because I'm not like every prediction I'm making today is going to be wrong in 5 years for sure. Especially with AI and everything, we don't know what tomorrow's going to be made of. What I can predict for sure is you're still going to have half of the SaaS companies that are running a seat-based pricing. That I'm pretty sure of. It's been 25 years they've been doing that. Salesforce has been doing that for 25 years. There is no sign of change. They're going to have add-ons. They're going to have more complex, more customizable price. But I'm pretty sure that half of the SaaS companies will keep a user-based pricing and you will pay per user. And then the price, like the amount you pay per user, why do you pay like €8 a month for GitHub and you pay €40 a month for a video storing thing for your sales calls? There is no, it's just a market thing, right? It's just, there is no difference. So maybe there is going to be move and some companies are going to be able to price higher, some lower, some are going to get commoditized, some not. But in the end, half of them are still going to have a seat-based pricing. And the more you grow your company, the more you're going to buy, the more you're going to pay the tools. So if you want to pay less, you're going to have to grow less people in your company, probably for 50% of your SaaS, in any case. Okay,
cool. Well, since we have maybe 2-3 more minutes, there's one question that's receiving quite a bit of upvotes. This is maybe an easy place to start. My competitor's product is priced like this. How should I price mine relative to theirs? Any final thoughts about setting price based on a competitor or a landscape of competitors?
So I think it's really important that if you're considering that as a customer to benchmark again, that you validate that they are indeed a competitor or an alternative in your customer's mind. Because so often we found that actually the clients are anchoring their prices on utterly irrelevant benchmarks to their customer's decision.
And a good way to find out a true competitor is to ask, what does that product enable you to do? Because you can be a HubSpot customer and you can do like 1,009 things with HubSpot, right? Some people use it for landing pages, sometimes marketing automation. So understand what it is that the product is enabling them to do before you decide what a competitor is. Your competitor in that case might be a workaround. It might be some freelancers or some code that an engineer put together on a late coffee binge once.
A spreadsheet.
Yeah.
The competitor for every business in the world is a spreadsheet.
Yes.
And it's free. Yep.
I think it depends what you're trying to position yourself relative to the competitor. If you're cheaper, then people are expecting, parity. You can also go in and be a lot more expensive than a competitor, and people will ask this question, well, hey, you're like 5 times the price of the other people in the market and you're getting customers. I wonder why. And that, that can be a good place to start a sales conversation. If you'll actually pick up the phone.
It can also be like a marketing play as well. Like, you might consider how your pricing model affects demand at the top of the funnel relative to what is actually validated, as we've said here, as a true competitor. Very good. Grand. Well, I'm hoping that this inspires some whiteboarding, virtual or in an office. There was a lot of dialogue, and we didn't get to it all, but we try to honor these 45 minutes of the team here. So thank you so much, panelists. Thank you so much, attendees. And I wish you all a really pleasant rest of week and happy pricing.
Thanks for hosting us, Sarah.
Yeah,
Thanks for having us. Yeah.
Indeed.
Bye-bye.
Ciao. Take care.